Hi Chris, how are you?
Good morning, Rod. I'm very well. Here we are on a sunny Sunday. I guess that's the right word. And it's Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to you.
Happy Father's Day to you, and it's equally sunny here in Swansea, I got to say, for a change. It's not raining on us. I'm going to take the dog down at the beach later and just enjoy a little bit of sand and surf with a hound.
That sounds pretty good, actually. That sounds better than me noodling around in the garden doing dad-like jobs on Father's Day.
You're meant to get a bit of a break. The kids should do something for you. Maybe you go and play Fortnite for them, and they can do some gardening stuff.
I think I'd rather be in the garden. Fortnite does not. I don't know why, it just doesn't gel with me. Do you know what my observation of Fortnite is, though, more recently?
What's that?
Fortnite is the everything game. No matter what you want to do, you can do it in Fortnite. You can build a base, you can shoot people, you can drive a car, you can have a race. You know, they've just kind of ended up lumping different games into one game, and it seems to just be, like I say, the everything game.
Yeah, that's not a bad observation. I got to say, I haven't played it for years. I didn't think very much of it. I quite like the Battle Royale format for all my Call of Duty-ness. But the whole, hang on, why is everybody building towers? Why are they going up in the sky? What's going on? I don't understand.
Yeah, that whole tower thing. And like I said, my son was doing a race, an actual race in it the other day. So like I said, they seem to have done everything. So I don't know. It's not for me, but it is popular with the youth of today.
It is popular with the youth of today. And this is episode 125, and you'll hear it around about the 17th of June, but we're recording it a couple of days early just because there's some holidays coming up. So expect this one, which is fairly current, and then the news we talk about in the next one may get more remote, and we'll do a couple of special bits.
Yep, that sounds like a good idea. Should we get into follow-up?
Let's get into follow-up. So it's going to be an odd mix this week. For the main show, we're going to talk about sort of post-WWDC stuff, but some of that has bled into follow-up as well, so this may be a bit all over the place.
Yep, so first up then we've got Apple's training model. They've used lots of data, they've scraped the internet for it, which they didn't really talk about in the main keynote, which, I don't know, it's going to come out, so it wasn't a great look for them. I think they let it slip in like a after-show talk with a YouTuber, and then on the Darren Fireball talk show as well. So I just think, I don't know, it felt like they weren't being 100% transparent at the top of the announcement.
No, and I mean, my personal problem with this is that you would expect Apple to try and do the right thing. They haven't done the OpenAI Google thing where they just send it out to the open web to scrape everything off people's websites and then go. And what they tried to sell us a little bit was, no, we're going to license this. But they've done both. They've set it out to the web, they've scraped loads of stuff, and now they've published this robots.ai, Apple robot scraper thing, that you can tell, as a web domain admin, turn this off, don't let Apple scrape my website, which is the right thing to do. But they've already done it. So asking after the fact is wrong.
Yeah, they should have, I don't know, 6 months ago gone, look, we're doing some AI piece. You all know it's coming because it's leaked. Here's what you need to put in your robots TXT file, which is a file websites run, and you can use it to steer what can scrape your website and various other bits and bobs. So I don't think it's a good look. I think we'll all have forgotten about it in 6 months' time, but I just think they could have handled it a little bit better and done it in the right way.
I think they could, and if I've remembered correctly, there's a more detailed follow-up on this a little bit further on, but I agree with you, and Craig Hockenberry picked this up, and that's the toot we've gone to, but there's an actual link to machinelearning.apple.com, which is Apple's own article about this, and I agree with you. They've done it because everybody else has, but for the creative company, I don't think this is a good look, particularly.
No, not a good look, one iota, which is a shame, but it is what it is. At least they have come out and said, we've trained it on publicly available data. They could have just ignored it, I guess.
There is always the worry with these things as well, that when you turn on or turn off the ability for these things to scrape your website, which you can do with Google as well, that they just ignore you and then go on and scrape it anyway, which is entirely possible with these things.
Yeah, which is something you kind of need to test later. Like, how long does it take for them to flush me out of the model? I don't know. So yeah, I think we've still got some more mileage in this over the coming months, but I think this is the one bit a lot of people are uncomfortable with, I think, following WWDC.
I thought it was the only bit, but it's probably the most prominent bit at the moment. Maybe we'll talk about the other thing as we go on. The second thing that's been a problem has been for Microsoft and their recall feature, which has been kind of a weird story in many ways. So if you recall, this was when they introduced their Copilot Plus PCs. This was going to be the new launch of the Snapdragon X Plus or whatever it's called chips that were going to run the ARM version of Windows. AMD and Intel were there as well, but sort of the headline feature was Copilot, was this recall feature, which would continuously screenshot what was going on with your screen, potentially save your passwords, put it all in a very open SQL database, which a couple of security researchers said, yeah, I can just mine this, absolutely no problem at all. Microsoft stuck to its guns, said, no, we're going to release this. This is just the way it is. Then there was a little bit of shenanigans where they said, well, we're just going to improve the encryption features of it. Then there was a little bit of shenanigans going, actually, it'll just go through Windows Insider. And now they said we're pausing it altogether.
Yeah, not a great look here. The feature potentially sounds interesting on the face of it, but then I think once you start looking into it, you end up in a very sticky place very quickly. So not surprised they've pulled it. Surprised they announced it, and it feels like they very much rushed it rather than taking the time to bake it properly and do it in 100% the right way. But I'm surprised they didn't foresee some of this backlash coming. I don't know, it seems odd. Maybe they were too close, too blinkered.
I've heard a couple of people talk about these AI features on podcasts recently, and I think it was Upgrade Podcast, and it may have been Jason or Mike, I can't say it best, that his take is it's a bunch of tech bros sitting around going, oh wow, isn't this cool? And it's just the cool feature that they go for rather than actually properly thinking through the repercussions of introducing these features into operating systems. We see a little bit of that with Apple as well, and we'll come back to that too. But this is, wouldn't this be great? And we've already said that recording everything you do on your PC is maybe not what you want. It's certainly not what other people want to see, and the fact that anything you send to other people is also captured as part of this. And then not to have any security on this at all, and have it on by default. It's just like every single error you can make in the sort of landscape of Microsoft really being under the microscope with the Department of Justice and things everywhere, not just in America but around the world. It's just, it seems like a perfect storm of stupidity to me.
Agreed. A lot of home goals that they could have got a few more bits right, and then that might have softened the blow. But yeah, it's been recalled and it's been panned indefinitely. So maybe they should carry on with this feature, because for some people this would be useful, but I think they need to do it in a very different opt-in, very secure way, and do it that way. And it's more like a beta that's optional rather than forced upon everybody. I'm just concerned Microsoft seems to be rushing a lot of features out the door. Why can't we just take a little bit of time and bake it properly, please?
So the question is, ignoring your enterprise hat, do you trust Microsoft?
No, not at all.
Right. So, and there's the problem, is that you, and you do have an enterprise hat on, don't trust Microsoft. I don't trust Microsoft. A lot of the researchers don't trust Microsoft, but it doesn't matter. We are where we are in the world. All the data goes through them. There's Azure. There's all the bits and pieces that it goes as well. And this could be the greatest feature in the world, and they could have introduced it with security. But in 5 minutes, there'll be a zero-day exploit, and everybody's recall would be on the internet. So it doesn't matter how good the feature is, how compelling it is, how much they say they've locked it down and secured it. It's never going to be trustworthy enough from that company unless they did it's open source, you can go through the code, we've validated it, and if there are mistakes, we'll get on it straight away. And that's more the approach you want. We're releasing this in beta for those that want to try it kind of thing, rather than just here it is, it's on by default.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with it. And look, I do trust Microsoft to get my productivity done. I trust them on all of those good apps. I do not trust them with this thing. I think they are just too big to do some of these features and to really police it. Because they imagine the perimeter they're trying to police on all fronts on attacks and zero-day exploits. So that would be my concern with it. I just want to see all the AI companies. Can we just slow down a bit and just take our time and do it properly?
Just this morning, actually, and it hasn't made it into the show notes. And if I get a chance when you're talking in one section, I'll find it. There's been a paper published in an academic journal called ChatGPT is Bull. I'll use the careful word crap, and that is an actual academic paper, and that's the title. And apparently there's an academic concept of bullcrap, referring to junky software basically and junky morals around things. So hopefully I'll get a chance to pop that into the show notes at some point. But it's permeated to academia now that these large language models may turn out to be something like Bitcoin, where it's a bit of a flash in the pan from tech bros, for want of a better word, who think this is a great idea and they're jamming it into all of their things. Apple have jammed it into all their things because fiduciary responsibility, you've got to give your shareholders, everybody expecting it. Their stock price jumped on the fact that they'd suddenly banged all these large language models into it. And I'm not in that camp. I think they have some use. I don't think they're the answer to everything, though, and that seems to be the trend at the moment, is that they're the answer to everything.
Yeah, I'm probably in a similar place to you. I think there's some good in there. They're not going to solve all my problems overnight. Whereas I think people were expecting, this was the biggest thing ever, it's going to revolutionise everything. And maybe it will, but not this year. We need to just keep evolving, chipping away. Kind of like when Apple brought out the mobile phone, the iPhone. It wasn't a sensation overnight, but they just carried on, iterating, and that's what you're going to see with the LLM piece. I think you're going to see its performance improve, hopefully, so that it's more green and we're not consuming all the compute power under the sun. You're going to see it get smarter, hopefully hallucinate less, have some checks and validations in place. So I think it will be amazing. I just don't think we're there yet. And I'm subscribing more to the specialists one rather than the general all-purpose ones, because it's kind of like with tradesmen. No tradesman is good at every trade, are they? You need to hone your skills on specific things, and that's my view. But it'll be interesting to see how it's all going to unfold.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Another thing we're waiting to unfold is Apple's position on RCS. So RCS is it's Rich Communication something. I think the acronym stands for. I'll let you look that up while I'm just giving the general overview. So this is the idea that we'll be able to speak more richly with Android phones. Apple haven't wanted to do this. The green bubble friends who give SMS versus the blue bubble friends who give us iMessage or messages as is now. You can get typing indicators, you can get tapbacks, you can do all that stuff. You can send high quality pictures to each other. Apple's been very resistant to this. However, in light of the DMA and other acts going on around the world, they've now agreed that they'll be part of the RCS standard. You and I commented on it last week that it wasn't immediately obvious in the keynote that this was happening, because it was meant to be happening. And basically that's where we are. It is still going to happen. There was one screenshot somewhere on one of the keynote slides, but they haven't given a date yet.
Yeah, so RCS is Rich Communication Services, which I don't know. Not fantastic. So it's coming. They've said it was on the corner of a bento slide, I think. So they did briefly mention it, which is more than I was expecting them to do. I was using messages on my iOS 18 phone just recently, and actually, if I text a friend of mine on his Android device, it now says it. Before you enter any text in that box grayed out, it says text message.sms. So I'm assuming at some point that's going to say text message.rcs. So I'm curious to see how that goes, because I guess, again, will it know that the other end is RCS capable, like it knows the other end's iMessage capable? I don't know how it does that, but I'm assuming my friend in this scenario, he would need an RCS capable receiver for me to send him an RCS message. So it's going to be interesting to see how they roll it out, but now I'm looking forward to this. I think this is 100% the right thing to do.
I agree. And this sort of segregation of people between green bubble and blue bubble, it doesn't matter. Most people don't use SMS anyway. They're on WhatsApp or Telegram or Facebook Messenger or whatever it is. So bringing interoperability between the most basic level of texting on the phone is just a thing that should happen. To your point, I'm sure it's entirely server-based. When they make a communication from one phone number to another, they just do a quick lookup and they go, I have these capabilities published. What can you accept? And that's the way it goes. I know Google's default SMS Messenger is RCS enabled in the UK and the United States, certainly, from my time on Android. Obviously, I don't really know anybody else with Android phones to text back and forth with, because I'm in my little Apple bubble here. But I suspect what you see is right, that it'll eventually turn to text.rcs instead of that.
Yeah, and it will. And the link in the show notes shows from Apple that it will say text message.rcs, and everything still stays green. And even when you send like an audio message, rather than it being blue, like is when you send one on iMessage, it will now be green as well. So yeah, very green. And WhatsApp-esque is what it looks like to me from what I've seen on WhatsApp. Because you always think of green with WhatsApp.
I think it's fine. I think these features should just be there. I quite like typing indicators. I like to see if a message has been delivered. I like to know when I send a picture to someone that they can see it in the quality I've taken the picture in. Let's face it. Once upon a time, you would send a picture and people would have to go off to the web and download bits and pieces. It was really complicated. It may still be the case. I don't know. I don't get that many pictures in SMS. So I think this is a good thing.
100%. Apple just too slow to pick it up, but at least they are picking up, and hopefully they do it in the right way.
Yeah, get on it, Apple. Next story, we talked about this briefly after the keynote last week, where Canon had released a lens that was spatial video compatible. Well, Blackmagic have as well, and this is a cool looking camera, you gotta say.
It does look pretty cool. Like you've got a massive camera. It looks like it's going to be heavy to put on your shoulder, and it's got two lenses on it. So it looks kind of cool. But yeah, huge.
90 frames per second and stereoscopic 3D. This is what you want in your basketball games and your football games and all that kind of stuff, presumably to record the action, so then people can watch it on their Vision Pros.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. This, like, how long is it going to take? Assuming it does take off, for this to filter through to people. So we are recording sports events with this kind of camera. How is it going to be a standard so that you can buy different headsets and watch this and stream it, to your Vision Pro to your Meta Quest to your, I don't know, Sony VR, assuming they're still doing stuff with their headset. It looks cool. Would love to see more content, because I think if there was more content on the Vision Pro, I'd be more tempted to get one.
I get increasingly more reservations about the Vision Pro as we go on, and we'll revisit that in the main part of the show. It's worth scrolling to the bottom of that article on The Verge to see the lenses, the spatial video lens fitted to a drone. It's not quite as big as you think it is, but again, if you're recording sporting events or you want to get nice outside shots, this is what you need.
Yeah, looks cool. I want to see some more content, please. I'm really looking forward to having to go on a Vision Pro. So once we can go and try them out here in the UK, I will going to nip down to an Apple store and have a go.
Fair play. And just to finish the follow-up section, I found my article on ChatGPT being bullcrap, and if anybody wants to read the serious academic article on this, there it is.
Cool.
And well done, by the way, as an academic. It's open access. Many academic papers you actually need to pay to access, and they've made this open for all, so that's quite a big deal.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Please do. Should we do some news?
Yeah, let's do the news. So Apple punishes women for the same behaviours that get men promoted. Wow, that's quite a strong opener.
Yeah, so, I mean, this article in Ars Technica is quite interesting, and just the headline says it all. Apple spent years intentionally, knowingly, and deliberately paying women less than men for substantially similar work in a class action lawsuit filed in California last Thursday. This could mean more than 12,000 current and former Apple employees could collectively claw back millions in lost wages. So this is significant, I think. It's absolutely unquestionable that men and women should be paid the same.
100%.
Why is this still a thing? I genuinely don't understand how this can still be a thing in 2024.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, I can't believe we're talking about this, to be honest with you, especially with the company that's got all the money. It's not like they can't use the excuse, well, we can't afford to harmonise pay. It's just something you've got to deal with. I'm sorry. And it is challenging. But why are we talking about this? In my team, I don't care whether you're a man or a woman, whether you identify or not. You're doing a job. You get paid to do the job, not because of who you are.
So, from one of the original plaintiffs in this case, one day I saw a W-2 left on the office printer. Don't know what that is. It belonged to my male colleague, who has the same job position. I noticed he was being paid almost $10,000 more than me, even though we performed substantially similar work. This revelation made me feel terrible. So, just the fact he was male for a same graded person, I presume it's some sort of payslip. Just wow.
Yeah, so W-2 must be an American term. I guess it would be like our pay slips over here, or maybe it's our P45s or what have you. It's not good, is it? It's really not good. It's hard to how can Apple justify it?
But this speaks to me of my increasing quiet with bits of the company. We've got greenwashing going on for all of our output is going to be solar powered and wind powered and all the rest of it, and then you build in ChatGPT models and we know that they're not efficient, so we're charging our phones more, blah 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 blah. You've got more server power going on, that's one thing. You've then got almost gender washing or something similar going on here, where they try to be the company of equality and privacy, and it doesn't matter, LGBTQ plus, they've got the rainbow in the middle of Apple Park, for goodness sake. And then this fairly fundamental thing is people are being paid at different levels just based on their gender. Unacceptable.
Yeah, and I don't know what it's like in America, but in the UK we have to do gender pay gap reporting every year if you're a listed company. Do they not have to do this? I'm surprised personally. And then they should be tracking it year on year. Is it moving hopefully in the right direction? And it's bad that we even have to report it because it shouldn't be a thing, because it should be dealt with. But obviously it still is. But I'm surprised they don't have to do that in the States.
The thing is, if it's just one Californian company, I presume it's all of them.
Potentially, which makes me sad.
On that sad note, let's talk about something that will make Apple sad. Apparently the EU is gearing up for a big fine. So the crux of this article, and it's the 9to5 Mac version of it that we've linked to by Chance Miller, is that following the DMA, the EU has been watching all the things they've been doing, and unsurprisingly, they don't feel, this is still rumoured, they don't feel Apple is in compliance with the DMA. I don't think that's in doubt, is it?
I thought they'd got to being in compliance, but I think Apple left it far too late and then made changes after the deadline.
I don't think this is that, though. This is things like they've said you can't do anti-steering rules, you can't delay companies like Spotify putting things into app stores in your own store and post them. I think it's their malicious compliance with the DMA is really what this is.
I still think they left it far too late to be compliant with, an international law, literally down to the wire, so that you couldn't actually make changes before the deadline. I think their whole handling of it was a bit disappointing.
So again, this is mostly about the anti-steering thing, which is what I've just described. If they move forward with this fine, it could be as high as 5% of Apple's average daily worldwide turnover, which is $1 billion.
Wow. It's a big number.
It is a big number. I wonder why it's worldwide turnover and not European turnover.
It's the same with GDPR. So the company I work for, even though we're only in the UK, they're very much of your worldwide turnover, that's how they measure it. I guess because it's too hard maybe to cut it down, and it's a not known number, and some companies don't disclose how much they make in certain territories, maybe. I don't know. And maybe it's worldwide as well, because obviously some companies, for tax purposes, have money paid into other countries, even though its source was, say, the UK, but it may be paid into Europe. Don't quote me on this, but you get my meaning. So that's probably why it's worldwide, because it's too hard to pin them down to a specific country, and you could end up penalising somebody nothing because of the way they do their taxes.
No, that's a really good answer. I think that makes sense. It's also a bigger number, isn't it? That if you are fining someone, you want as much money out of them as possible, so why not go for the worldwide fee?
Yeah, if you want behavioural change, hit them where it hurts.
Well, they still haven't paid the last €2 billion euro fine. They're appealing that. And of course, they'll be able, if this happens, they'll be able to appeal this as well. But this could be a bit of money stacking up for Apple.
Yeah, it does feel like they're going to need some form of mechanism to pay over a period of time, or they're going to have to, invade the little war chest they've got.
They've got plenty of money. Although once they pay all the women the amount of money they own too as well, then there could be quite a lot of money coming out of Apple.
It's just not a good look.
And frankly, this is all correct. People, we've just said everybody should be paid the same for the work that they do, and not obeying the laws of a region, area, or anything, and maliciously doing it, making it look like you are in the most grudging way possible. I think this is right. They should be fined. They can afford it. Microsoft should be fined for doing their things. No company should be above the law. Just because we think they're cool, and I still think they're cool, that all this stuff is wrong, and they need to do better.
Yep, completely agree with you. Find them, change their behaviours, and hopefully, if you find the big boys, it will make the smaller businesses toe the line as well.
And on the same note, Japan has just done the same thing. So it's putting legislation into place to force Apple and Google to allow third-party app stores and payments. And I think they've already had a go at doing some of the anti-steering stuff, as has Korea. But this is it's going to happen now. That this has happened. I did see a little link from an article this morning by Gruber saying he didn't think this was fair, that Apple are doing this to Google. The Japanese government are doing this to Apple and Google. Why aren't they doing this to Sony and Nintendo, who forced you to do internal purchases on their app stores? Is this just an anti-American law? I'd say the reach of Apple and Google is far more significant than within gaming. In principle, fine, but he was pitching it as an anti-American thing rather than anything else, and I don't think that's particularly fair. You need a smartphone to survive. You don't need a Nintendo Switch to survive.
True. I guess you could argue this either way, though, in that you could argue it one way, in that obviously Google, Apple, Microsoft provide general computing platforms, and it just so happens that all of our worldwide general computing platforms originate from America. But then you could play it the other way. Well, Sony, Nintendo, et al. Provide app stores, obviously game stores predominantly, and why can't I have the Steam store on my PlayStation, for example? So I think this should play across both, if I'm honest. I don't disagree with Gruber, but equally I don't agree that it's aimed at America. I think they've started with general computing platforms, which makes sense, but it should cascade down. But then you're going to end up with the Switch having different stores on it in marketplaces. What happens about your Steam Deck, for example, your PlayStation, your Xbox? This then opens up a whole thing, because the PlayStation's business model is geared around selling the PlayStation as a bit of a loss leader. But you're going to get revenue back in repeated game sales and subscriptions. So I don't know. It could get quite interesting, to say the least.
It's already a bit muddy, isn't it? Like Steam Deck, you can go and install the Epic Store on, for example. So it's an open platform. It hasn't killed the Steam Deck. I think it does all right. Valve don't really care. They don't sell it as a loss leader. Nintendo don't sell the Switch as a loss leader. They make a profit on every console they sell. So it depends slightly on the business model. Microsoft would be screwed, because the whole premise of the Xbox is that you use the Xbox Games Pass and you get everything through that. But I think Sony, they could jack up the price, they could put a CD tray back in the thing, and you could get. In fact, mine does have a DVD drive on it, Blu-ray drive on it. So I don't know if that's exactly the same argument to point at game stores as others, because most game stores, Valve being the exemplar or Nintendo being another one, could open up without particular loss to their revenue.
But surely though they'd have the same problems as Apple in that they need to do a lot of engineering and put the back ends in place to,
Apple's done the engineering.
No, Apple has now, but Nintendo probably haven't to have alternate marketplaces. Same with Sony. It's not a small feat, is it?
It's not a small feat, particularly as Nintendo's almost as glacial as Apple. So, I mean, that's a consideration too. And we know Sony services are generally dreadful. The people that write the games are good, but anything where Sony stuff touches the web, it's awful.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So this is interesting. The UK, I suspect, will be along here in a minute doing exactly the same thing. Open stores, stops steering, and all of these companies will be looked at that point. We already know the CMA has been looking at Microsoft and their gaming things. So I kind of agree with your point that it does feel. I don't think it's anti-American. I think it's.
No, I don't think it's anti-American. I think
you've said very well.
You're starting with generic platforms.
Yeah.
But it should it distill down to very specific platforms. I don't know. I don't think I've got a good answer for that.
It's just. It's so difficult for these companies, isn't it, to be legislated against and to do the right thing. Companies that do the right thing are perceived really well. You start buying their products, and then we're into the whole institutification thing again, because you serve your customers, then you start serving your employees, and then you serve your shareholders. That's what happens. You got to maximize profit. Capitalism is at fault here. None of these companies.
This is true. I was frustrated though out the back of WWDC that Apple haven't widened the European, feature set to other markets, because I thought this could be an opportunity that, they could go, look, we've tested in Europe, we've agreed, we've done what the laws asked, we're now opening up worldwide, or we're going to have it in other territories, and get in front of being forced to do it. And I was disappointed with that. I thought there could be a scenario where they do that. But it was disappointing they literally paid no mention to it.
Yeah, but we've said this the last 3 years, I think, haven't we? This is when Apple will get in front of it, rather than just be forced to do it all the time. They'll get out in front and they'll make the right thing, and they'll make all these various competitions and authorities and governments happier, and users and developers, and they don't.
No, not at all.
Moving on, there's the phrase that pays. We speculated before about Windows moving to ARM and what sort of effect this would have on the market. I think recall is going to have a very bad effect on those Copilot Plus PCs, unfortunately. It's a shame when you come out with such good technology that we've seen within Apple hardware that it's now going to be in some level, I think, related in people's heads to recall.
But potentially, but a lot of non-tech people probably aren't aware of it. But it must be frustrating, though, if you're the manufacturer like Qualcomm, you've partnered with Microsoft very publicly, and then one of the key features has been taken off, because it doesn't, you're tainted by association, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. Qualcomm aren't the only players in the ARM space. So MediaTek, which is featured in this story on The Verge, are also about to bring their own ARM chips for Windows computers to market as well. We've seen MediaTek chips and things before. I think they're in the Nintendo Switch. I think they're in a couple of other platforms as well. So a well-respected company. You can get some smartphones with MediaTek chips built in them as well. I think some early Samsung ones did. And then I think Samsung make their own ARM chips too as well, actually. So there's a few players in this space.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. And it feels like we're going to have AMD Intel wars, like you and I remember probably from the late 90s. I'm super curious on this because we're buying some PCs where I work, and it was like, should we get one of these in and try out what is using an ARM-based Windows 11 device in a corporate environment like now, and at what point would we switch over? Because obviously we're not running games, we're running largely out of the box Office apps and various other vendors. So we're going to try a couple, I think, and just dip our toe in the water so we can keep an eye on it proactively, so when the time is right we can switch if we want. I think the big problem we've got is actually buying an Intel based device. A pretty good spec one is about £700 here in the UK, whereas when you're buying one of these it's going to be significantly more in the short term, so it's going to push up our average price if we were to do it anytime soon, but I'm sure over time they will come back down.
Definitely. And the other gains in terms of battery life and things like that for mobile devices particularly, as well as having higher compute, is probably worth it.
Yeah, it potentially is worth it, but when you employ a lot of people, obviously the multiplier is quite significant.
Yeah, I'm going to confuse Chris by jumping one story in the show notes and talking about just this is applying to Linux as well. So all these ARM chips are beginning to apply. So this is a company who makes Linux computers. They're called Tuxedo. They make a distribution as well. But they're looking at the Snapdragon X Elite Silicon on chip as part of their next range of laptops too. So this is good. It's not surprising the fact that Linux is going to be fairly quickly on this as well. If you looked into the Asahi Linux project, which brings Linux to Macs on silicon on chip architectures, the reverse engineering those guys have been doing to make Linux work on Apple Macs is just incredible. Because Apple don't publish what's in their hardware, they don't publish the specifications, unlike I presume Qualcomm will do and what Intel and AMD did before. It was quite easy to build, it was easy-ish to build drivers on Linux before, because they used to, for Windows operating systems, they'll get published to Microsoft. Microsoft get a spec what's going on so they can build underlying architecture. So firmware vendors understand very well what's going on, and Microsoft can then get hold of that. That very rarely happens on Linux. So this is good news, I think, that Tuxedo are beginning to build towards ARM computers. Other Linux laptop manufacturers like Framework and others will presumably as well. So I think this is good. And to what you were saying earlier, it makes the platform healthier. If we're all moving to ARM, it creates more competition. It's more competition for Apple. They're going to have to look at the battery lives and all the rest of it. And I think choice in operating systems is increasingly important.
It's it's certainly good for ARM, isn't it? As everybody's slowly emigrating to them over time, it's going to be fantastic for them as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it? I occasionally get this where I look at hardware that comes in these laptops that aren't Apple laptops, and the choice of things that you can get in them is incredible compared to what we get on that Mac side of the fence.
Incredible, and incredibly cheaper in comparison as well.
Well, relatively so. By the time you spec them up to having high-density screens and all the rest of it, then that price differential does start to move a little bit. But if you were to go to Framework, for example, and start trying to configure, at this point, an AMD or an Intel laptop, just the choices you can have. How many USB ports do you want? How many display ports do you want? Do you want HDMI? Do you want a card reader? Do you want this? Do you want all that level of choice? And it's like £7 to choose between the number of things that you want. It's not 200 quid just to go up 256 gigs of hard disk space. You know, it's hugely different market.
Very different world, isn't it?
It is. And then our last story in news, he said, going back one, is that the Department of Justice case against Apple is getting bigger as 4 more states have jumped onto this antitrust case. So, Apple, you got to be paying attention.
Like I see previous points why I'm disappointed they didn't bring the EU functionality of marketplaces, app distribution over to America, UK, whereas screaming worldwide would be the right answer in my eyes. But they're obviously playing a different game, and I get it's revenue impacting for them, but it's got to be the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it is the right thing to do. It's just a damn shame it's always got to come to legislation.
Agreed.
Have we got any other news?
No, I don't think so. I think post WWDC, it's been, I'm not going to say quiet. There's not been much that's come out off the back of it that wasn't announced on day one. Obviously, there's been all the sessions. Less interesting for me this year, but yeah, I think there's not been massive other news. It's not like other companies have dropped big news to try and take some noise away from Apple at all.
Yeah, Microsoft have sort of diverted people's attention a little bit with recall, but other than that, I agree with you. There's not that much change.
Yeah, I don't think that was more of a faux pas than a plan, though, wasn't it?
It was. Should we do some media?
Let's do media.
So, just an interesting little thing. I was clicking around on Netflix the other night looking for something to watch, and I came across this cartoon animated thing called Scavenger's Reign, and it's a science fiction thing with some survivors of a shipwreck stuck on a planet. I've only watched the first episode. It's one of the most inventive things I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever seen such inventive sci-fi for a very long time, frankly. So it really sort of caught my attention. I'm going to go back and visit it again. I don't really want to talk about it so much, but just the variety of wildlife and flora and fauna that they encounter as part of trying to survive on this planet, super inventive. I really think it's worth a look if you get any interest at all. And
it's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, so definitely worth looking at it by the looks of things.
Definitely worth looking at it. I like I say, inventive is the only word I can apply to it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It looks good. Is it funny? Or is it serious? Like what sort of? Is it more of a drama than a comedic piece?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Don't watch it with your kids.
Right. Okay, understood.
It's certainly got a more adult theme, but Yeah, that's a thing. I check out the first episode and see what you think. There's bits of humor in it. There's bits of drama in it. It's very hard to categorize.
Okay. Next up, we've got MKBHD and Tim Cook. So MKBHD, the YouTuber, has interviewed Tim Cook, which I assume you've watched this as well. But I kind of like Tim Cook, but I'm not sure he comes across great on interviews. I just find him very, I don't know, monotonal, I guess is the word, which is a shame because he's obviously a very clever person. He's obviously led Apple in some amazing ways, in the 12 years he's been there. I think maybe even more now, maybe 13 years this year, in that he's growing the company, done, delivered some amazing stuff, but I struggle to watch him. I just don't find him engaging, which is a shame because I want to find him engaging.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with Tim Cook per se. I think for me, he comes over slightly better in interviews than he does when he's presenting, because I think that's his personality. He's an operations guy. He's very thoughtful. He's got a plan, and he goes out and you can see him considering questions very carefully before he answers anything. Perfect for Apple and, the whole secretive way that they've got going on. I just thought Marquez's questions were quite good to him, and I don't know if you've watched the whole thing, but he sort of tried to get him to rate some of the products that have come to market. And the one that made me smile was the Magic Mouse. And everybody knows the Magic Mouse is absolute hot garbage these days. And I saw I think it was Steve Troughton Smith's take on it, but the Apple don't want you to buy a mouse. They've been a trackpad company for a very long time now. What the hell are you even trying to use a mouse with an Apple computer for? That's why it's as bad as it is. But people keep still buying them, so why would we change it? And he gave he was meant to score them. He didn't score them for Marquez, but I just thought it was quite an interesting interaction. And Marquez is a really good interviewer. I think he brought the best out of Tim Cook that I've seen.
Oh, 100%. He's fantastic. And I thought they were quite a good juxtaposition for each other. You've got the older, very corporate person. You've got the younger YouTube creator. I thought they were, he did a really good job. You can't fault him. Tim Cook, though, could be a politician.
Tim Cook is a politician. He runs one of the biggest companies in the world. He's a politician.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, he probably is a politician. But anyway, it's worth a watch. And it's not very long, it's sub quarter of an hour, I think. So would recommend just to have a look at it. But I just struggle a bit with it. Like I say, I want to like Tim Cook, and I think there's a lot he's done that is right. But I just, like I say, struggle with his engagement. But would definitely recommend it. It's worth a watch.
I don't know, all the stuff we've just talked about with Apple and Pay and all the rest of it. Do you want to like Tim Cook?
I do, because he has delivered Apple at scale. And he's brought some good stuff. But yeah, I guess there's a lot of critique. But you're such a big company, you're going to be constantly fighting fires on all fronts, aren't you? That's sadly part of his job, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't watched the talk show with Gruber and the executives yet. I don't know if you have.
I watched a little bit at the start, but I then switched over to listen to the rest of the podcast because I thought once I've actually seen the setup, you can visualize it as you're listening to the Audible. It's okay. It's the same as what it is most years. It's got some interesting little tidbits in there. But I guess the problem you've got is the people asking the questions, have to be careful because if they try and dig too deep, they're not going to get asked to do it again. So it can be career limiting. So it is, it's just what you'd expect from previous years. That's what I would go with.
Tell us about Welcome to Wrexham.
So Welcome to Wrexham is just finished. There's 8 episodes in Series 3. Everybody should watch it. It's so good. The whole thing is fantastic. I'm not a big football person. I'm watching a little bit of the Euros with my son. But the series is just so good. And again, I'd like to hope they're doing all the right stuff for Wrexham and the team and sorting out pay and improving the facilities. And Wrexham as a whole must massively benefiting from the spotlight this show shined on it. But fantastic series. I don't want to spoil the end. You may already know the ending because obviously it's in the public domain. But Wrexham are doing really well, and it's great. And I'm already want to watch another series. I'm amazed they only did 8 episodes because it feels like they could have done more with what they're doing. The ladies' team's doing well, the boys' team's doing really well. They're doing stuff like I say in and around the community. Just thought it was fantastic. And yeah, just like feel good TV in a way.
I kind of want to watch it for Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney and Wrexham as much as anything else. I could not care less about the football. I should give it a go. In the same way that I'm starting to watch Clarkson's Farm. I've watched 3 episodes of it now. This is in that vein, isn't it? Yeah. Whereas I'm probably more interested in farming than football, so that might be a thing.
But no, Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds, they come across so well on it. They're funny. They're self-deprecating. They just come across as genuinely nice people wanting to do the right thing. But the whole 3 series I've watched, it's just so well done. And like I say, obviously there's bits of football in it. but that's more filler as it's setting the tone for what they do next. So we'd 100% recommend. I just think it's a fantastic show.
Fair enough. The Boys season 4 started this week on Amazon. If you haven't watched any of The Boys before, it's kind of a superhero take where superheroes are. If people had the power of Superman, they'd probably be awful people. They'd be able. They could just take over the planet. They could do what they wanted, and it's that really. It's looking at the negative side of people, of superpowered people, and there's lots of stuff in there about Trump and American politics and bits and pieces as well. It's very gory. It's very. Language is awful. It's very funny, very darkly funny, with some terrific actors in it, not the least of which is Carl Urban, who I've got a total man crush on because I think he's terrific, because he's Dredd, amongst other things. He was even in a really bad film called Doom with Dwayne The Rock Johnson back in the day, and was one of the riders of Rohan in the Lord of the Rings films as well. So he's been around the block, Carl Urban. But him and I can't remember the chap's name. He's Dennis Quaid's son, something Quaid, and all the cast of that are terrific. It's very, very funny. It's based on a British graphic novelist called Garth Ennis, who also did Preacher. Terrific, well worth a watch.
Interesting you mentioned Lord of the Rings in there. I've just been rewatching the extended version. I'd forgotten it's nearly 4 hours long for one episode. No, it sounds good. I'm not sure if I'd fancy it if it's really gory, because I do struggle with that, and I'm in the mood for some feel good TV at the moment.
It's really gory.
Okay, enough said.
People explode all over the place. I was going to save it because I've got a long plane ride coming up, and I thought I'll watch this on the plane. And then I thought, no, I don't want some 4-year-old sat behind me looking in between the seats going, "Oh my God, he's just crawled up that guy's." Yeah.
Yeah, you've got to be careful what you watch on a plane. This way, you need your Vision Pro so you can be completely isolated.
I don't watch Bridgerton. My children do. Apparently, there's the second longest sex scene on British television. Has been in Netflix. It was a Bridgerton show this week. It's 6 minutes and 57 seconds or something. It was featured in The Guardian this week. And lots of people have been innocently watching it on trains, and it's just gone on and on and on.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is a concern when you're watching something in the public space, isn't it?
It very much is. Anything else in media?
I have, but I'm saving it for my thing of the week.
Okay, we also can't forget, we should go through the Apple Top 100 at some point as well. That's a long way behind us, but I want to not lose it.
We should circle back to that. I'm a little frustrated with Apple because they show me a couple of albums from the Top 100, but to actually get all the Top 100 goodness, they seem to have squirreled it away in the Music app, which is frustrating for a project that's obviously taken them a lot of time and effort, and then to have hidden it so quickly, it's very of the moment, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Should we do a couple of games? So I haven't really played many games. I've played a little bit of one, but I just thought it was interesting because I talked about it last year. It's Steam's Next Fest, which is when there's lots of demos available. So if you've got a Mac or a Steam Deck or something like that, you'll find up-and-coming games featured. There's about 100 of them altogether. And I've picked out from Rock, Paper, Shotgun their 9 favourite demos. Of the 9 that are listed here, and some of them look really interesting, and I do want to find 5 minutes to go back to them. I have tried the first one on this list, which is called Tactical Breach Wizards, which I think is just a great title for a game anyway. And it's kind of I'm going to say the word, Slay the Spire / XCOM derivative, which is a bit card-based, bit movement-based, sort of almost real-time strategy sort of game. Really interesting art style, good story. I quite like the thought of wizards performing like, SAS assault officers or something like that. It's quite good fun. So I've quite enjoyed the sort of first level demo I've played of that, and just check out Steam Next Fest if you have the ability to do so.
Yeah, I was just looking through it. I've not heard of any of these games, but that's probably more on me than them. I was looking at Tiny Glade. Looks like a building sort of game. That looks quite interesting. So there's some good ones in there.
I think it's good that you haven't heard from these games. They don't always need to be from AAA developers. And frankly, the state of AAA gaming at the moment and the way that studios keep getting shut down and the way that they get treated by Electronic Arts and Bethesda and Microsoft and all these big companies, the little more indie games are far more interesting in many ways. And things like Threes and things like Slay the Spire and, from those kinds of companies, a lot of the games from Devolver, these are maybe where we should be looking for our next, there'll always be the tentpole GTA 6s and things that are going to come along, and Gran Turismo 8 presumably at some point. But these sort of smaller scale, more indie developer things are far more interesting in many ways.
I don't disagree with you. I think, and there's been so little come out on the PlayStation this year, it's embarrassing in a way. So no, I'm with you actually. I think you're right. We need to go hunt out some of the games from unknown people or much smaller studios.
And well done, Valve, for featuring them in an event like this, where you log in at Steam and you're presented with some of these things that you can just download and have a go and bookmark it for when they become available later in the year.
Yep, no, it's good.
Speaking of AAA games, Civilization 7 has been pre-announced. Apparently, it's due to come in 2025. And unfortunately, keeping in mind everything I've just said, this will be an insta-buy for me the second it's there.
Do you know what? I haven't played a Civ game, not properly, for a long time. I own a bunch of them. They come out on lots of platforms, but I haven't really sat down and got to grips with one. But now my children are a bit older, I'm thinking, actually, you know what, this is probably going to land at the right time for me. So I will be there. It's interesting though. So Civ 7, it's been a long time since we had Civ 6, and they've had various add-ons, and like I said, they got it on every platform. But Civ 7's come out on Switch, PlayStation 4, 5, PC, Xbox One, Xbox X. So they're going in a lot of places with this. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about playing it on a console. And I know they've done a lot in modern day Civ to make that doable, but I don't know. I've always been a keyboard and mouse person with Civ. I don't know if I need to rewire myself for this.
Well, you can plug in a keyboard and a mouse with your PlayStation, of course.
Yeah, this is true. I should, or Bluetooth it, I guess, and try it, but also have to wrestle with my kids to get it. But no, I want to see it. What isn't on there, though, is Mac. It's a shame it's not coming to the Mac, because with Apple's recent push, you know, it'd be nice to see this game and how, like you say, you want to get to that position where Mac's just in the list and it's like, oh wow, Mac's in there. You know, you want it to be the norm. So I'm super excited for it. Like I say, I haven't played Civ for a long time. So like you, I'll probably buy this when it comes out.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be able to play it on my Linux computer, I'm sure. Maybe on the Steam Deck as well, so that's an option. Keep in mind, Civ 6 was released for Mac and was released for iOS and iPadOS. In fact, I've got it on my iPad. It's a real battery hog, but it's the same game that you get on. So I would be very surprised if it doesn't make some sort of leap, unless it didn't make any money.
There is that. But it is impressive the amount of platforms they got that game on.
Yeah, and Civ, for those that don't know, is what's called a 4X game: Embrace, Extend, Expand, Extinguish, or something like that. It stands for, where you start with the population in the caveman days, and the idea is you build it into a world-spanning civilization or something like that. There's a few of these games. Humankind is another one that's sort of a same sort of bent to it. So they're great. I've been playing them since the original Civ back in the day, so I've got a lot of time invested in Civ, and it remains a great game.
Yeah, it's a fantastic concept. I love it. So Civ 2, I sunk an inordinate amount of time into that game.
Anything else in games?
Nope, not for me.
So, a main show where I'm pretty much just going to hand over to you and shut up because you're running all of the betas since WWDC, is that right?
Yeah, I think I am. Well, I haven't installed the AirPods firmware beta because that felt a little too scary for me. But it is available. You can do it now, and I haven't put any betas on my HomePods. So that's my disclaimer up front. So I've installed. Well, where should we start? Why don't we start with tvOS? So I've installed tvOS. And I walked away from the TV. I came back. I was like, "Is it installed? How do I know it's installed?" You know, and you're looking at it, and you go to the about screen. Oh, it's installed, and there's nothing there. In the UK, we haven't even got the Insight functionality. So for me, tvOS is a nothing beta. There is, nothing to see here, which is a shame because I really have a lot of fondness for the tvOS platform.
Fine, I 100% agree with you. I didn't see anything in fact, in the keynote, it was barely mentioned. Is there really nothing in the HomePods?
I think there is an update for it, but I haven't installed it. I think I could install it on my minis. I would like to know whether my original HomePods are still supported, because to be fair to Apple, they came out a long time ago and they've been, constantly supported. So I'm curious to know, are they going to make iOS audio HomePod 18? I don't know what the OS is called on my HomePod. So I've not done anything with the HomePods at the moment. I'm going to wait a little bit because they're flaky enough without having a beta on it. And I do like my HomePods. So yeah, I haven't done it with them. So tvOS, nothing really to report, which is a shame. Because like I say, it's my favourite platform, but it did get a lot of love last year, so probably not a big surprise. So that's tvOS done. Next up, macOS. So I booted up macOS, dove straight into it. Thought, system settings is going to be improved. Went straight into that. Nothing's happened there. Whether that will drop in another beta, or whether they've just not touched it at all and they're doing it on the iOS platforms first and then it will come back to the Mac, I guess. But again, similar problem there. Is there anything different here? Because in beta 1, the iPhone mirroring app isn't there, which is probably the thing that's more interesting trying out. So yeah, not a lot to report there. And I think this is a bit of a theme here. not a huge amount to report across all the different betas, but all seem fairly solid. Now I haven't used macOS in earnest. I've dabbled with it and had a click around, but yeah, sadly not much to report. So why don't we then move on to the OSs I have played with? I haven't touched WatchOS, by the way, because I don't own a watch. So apologies on that one. So iOS and iPadOS. So I have installed them and I've been using them on my daily devices. I don't recommend people do this. They can be a little bit of a battery hog because they're doing more diagnostics and reporting. And you usually go through this phase where the first few betas, devour a load of battery, and then it gets better as we get closer to the shipping version. On the whole, though, because I don't think Apple have done a huge amount, I don't think there's not much that they have broken or any major bugs. So I'm using my iPhone every day. I've got the Office suite on there for work, no issues there whatsoever, and the same on my iPad. Some functionality is not in there, so all the AI stuff isn't in yet. And I think when the AI stuff comes, we're going to have to switch our language over to American English, or English US that they call it, to use any of the Siri capabilities. So I'm excited to play with that, but it's not in this first beta. Now normally when they do the first round of betas, they take the cut quite a few weeks ago before WWDC, so they've got a relatively, I guess, known entity to release for the first beta. Hopefully beta 2 will then bring a lot of the stuff we've seen at WWDC. So I'm hoping we're going to start getting some of the AI bits filter through, and I think that's what everybody really wants to play with. So then going into the iOS then, so what have I played? So I'm just trying to unlock it while we're talking so I can pick up on it. So first up, put in icons anywhere on your home screen. They've done a great job. You still go into jiggle mode, because you and I did discuss, will that be a thing? Yes, jiggle mode's there. And yes, I think they've actually made moving your icons a lot easier. I've managed to play with it a little bit. I think it's really, really good. So I did what they did in the show. I've got a picture of my children, and I just put the icons around the outside, and I can see their faces peeking through the icons, which I think is quite nice. If you swipe to your left, well, you pull the left screen over. I don't know how to explain it, but you go to the widgets view, which is a screen I often forget about. They've now done away with the classic widgets. That's now been deprecated. Just a FYI on that. But what they have done is when you edit, you can now drag a widget to be bigger, which is quite nice. You don't need to delete the widget and put a different widget back in. It's more real time. Obviously, it will only snap to the different sizes the widget supports. The big thing, though, to mention, and for me, I love it, is changing the icons to dark mode, because I do get a little cheesed off where a lot of the icons have just got a white box around the icon. I think I don't like that style as much, but actually I find it less offensive in dark. So if you do that, for example, the music icon will change and it will be a black box instead of a red pinkish box historically had a white musical note in it. It now has a red musical note in it in a black box. Same with messages. Rather than having a white speech bubble in the middle, it's got a green speech bubble and a black outside, and all the icons follow that theme. I really quite like it. I can't tell if I like it just because it's different or because it's actually really good, but actually quite like it. So I think they've done a nice job there, so changing that. I don't like the tinted icons. That's just stupid. I'm sorry. I just don't think it works. I think you have to work hard to get it to look nice, and you probably depends what icons you're trying to tint. But for me, I just don't see why they did that, if I'm being honest. One thing that has been fed back, though, is when you put the icons in dark mode, it puts your widgets in dark mode. I quite like. But if you want the light icons and dark widgets, you can't seem to do that. The two seem linked, but they shouldn't be linked, if that makes sense. They've obviously changed settings as well. So I thought, oh no, what are they going to do to settings? But actually, it's a very minor change. So they've tightened up all the Apple piece. And then at the bottom where you had the long list of apps, they've now moved all those apps into a section called apps. So you tap through to a second screen. But they've put all the Apple apps in there as well. So what you haven't got now is a list of Apple apps in a weird order that links back to the first version of settings from a long time ago. It's all in alphabetical order, and you can skip through the letters of the alphabet. So just a nice quality of life improvement, in my opinion, of the whole settings app. They've just tightened it all up. And if you tap on general, you now get an icon at the top and then a bit of an explainer and some more icons going down the page. So yes, settings is a lot nicer. They've moved all the iCloud stuff around again. I don't know why they seem to move it. And weirdly, in iCloud, where you've got iCloud Plus at the top, they've taken a thing out of the News app where it says Subscriber Edition. If you remember, that's on the Apple News Plus tab. It just seems a bit of an odd graphic to have, but I guess maybe they're trying to lean into that you're subscribed. I don't know. It seems a bit odd. They've renamed your Apple ID to Apple Account. I guess makes sense. I don't think I've got feelings on this either way. But on the whole, settings isn't really any different. They've just tidied it up, give it a nip and a tuck, which I think is probably all they needed to do. But the biggest one for me that I've quite enjoyed, I must say, is Control Center. So if you swipe down from the top right, you get Control Center. And obviously before you had Home in there and you had Music in there. You now don't need any of that in there, but they leave it in by default. But I've taken those out because you've then got a further page. So if you scroll down further, you get a nice big music widget, which is fantastic. And if you scroll down again, you can have a whole sheet with all your home icons on it. What I have done though is turn that off from being automatic to being manual, so I can pick exactly where everything is. So it's in exactly the same place, and I'm going to do the same on my iPad and my iPhone. So you pull down, you've got all the widgets in the same place. It's annoying that doesn't sync between devices. It's a per device setting. But I think they've done a really good job of Control Center. But what it does mean though is my first page of Control Center, because I've taken Music and Home out of it, there's actually not much in it. But I think that will change once third parties can support it. So your third party apps, like Outlook, can have a widget to, maybe take you straight into create a new email. Same with Teams and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what third parties do with that. But I think Control Center is a real win. I think they've just done a really good job of it. And it's really easy to edit, move things around, drop new widgets in. They've done probably more than I'd expect here. They've also put colour in. So, where you have brightness rather than it being black and white, the brightness sun is now yellow and the speaker for the audio is like blue. Quite nice to have a little splash of colour in it. So would recommend that. And then on the lock screen, and my muscle memory is hurting a little bit because you can now swap out the torch and the camera actions. Again, they use Control Center frameworks. So I've put Shazam down where my camera used to be because I've got my capture button on my iPhone 15 Pro. So that's set to camera, but I keep launching Shazam when I need to launch the camera because, it's, 5 years, maybe longer of having that there. But other than that, no major changes to the home screen. What am I missing? I think that's largely it. There's a few other nips and tucks around. The mail changes haven't shipped yet. Safari's largely the same, but they've changed the AA icon to not a great icon, a box with some lines underneath it. And they've just reorganized those menus a little bit. But what is good, I guess, with Safari is they haven't gone back to a design they did years ago where they had a floating address bar and it landed very badly. So that's all good. I think that's it on the iPhone. Other than that, everything else just, all feels very polished. I've had no major crashes, like launching a banking app or anything like that just kills the app instantly. What do you think about what I've said about the iPhone? Is there anything I'm missing on the iPhone?
No, I mean, I haven't tried it. I haven't put it on my device. I thought before I go traveling, the last thing I want to do is have something that's hogging my battery and potentially killing it, and then having to also maybe get updates while I'm away.
Unlike a colleague of mine who went on holiday yesterday and the day before put it on and went, I don't know why I've done it. It's really slow.
It's not a good plan. I'll say this again, and you said it at the start. Well done. Don't put betas on your production devices unless you're crazy.
Thank you, mate.
You're welcome. So no, I haven't put it on my phone. Everything sounds feasible. The only thing I pick out is I put it in the show notes. Apparently there's now math and conversions built into the keyboard on iOS 18. Is that part of your thing now?
I haven't tried it, I must confess. It's probably not good audio, but I can try it now. So
apparently it's a bit like the math notes thing. You can enter math and conversions into a text field in iOS 18, and the suggestion bar above the keyboard will show you the answer. You can choose to show your work and enter the equation and solution into the text field. Does that work?
So I've just typed 8 times, trying to get it in focus, 8 times 9, and then I wrote equals, and then it popped 72 in yellow to show it's doing it for me. So it's kind of cool.
There you go. So that's quite cool that that's built in, and not before time. Spotlight was able to do that, for goodness sake. Why couldn't text fields? And often if you're doing a text for somebody and you're trying to work something out quickly, the fact that could be built in, if you're quite, you get 10 mates and you're trying to divvy up and saying, we all need to pay 50 quid for this thing, it'll do it for you, and that's quite helpful.
Yeah, that is quite cool. I hadn't noticed it. I must confess I don't use notes a huge amount. I use
this is in any text field.
It's
in any text field. So I think if you're SMSing someone, you should be able to do it directly in there.
Okay, I will try that out as well. One thing I forgot to mention on me was the phone app actually. So go into the phone app. Actually, favorites. It feels like they've Swift UI'd a little bit of it. We had it last year, I think, where they did the big picture. They modernised that kind of interface, but they've actually done the favourites one now because it was looking very iOS 1, and the same one since they've just not changed it significantly, but just brought it in line with the modern sort of design aesthetic. And then I must say though, voicemail, we can now get transcriptions here in the UK, which is fantastic. So that's all part of their live voicemail setting, which is it's not perfect, but it's better than not having it. So I think that's really good.
Phone app can do phone things.
It is interesting, isn't it? Like, these are called iPhones, but how many of us actually use it for a phone these days? That's how it started out, but we've soon moved towards the internet communicator piece.
No, I think that'll do us for iOS, and we'll revisit this as we go on. And at some point down the beta train, I might install it on my phone, but certainly not for the next couple of weeks.
My recommendation for most people, if you're interested, wait for the public beta, because normally then they've just tightened the obvious screws and that. But I've had a great experience with it.
Does Siri still look like? Does Siri still look like classic Siri, or do you get the glowing thing around the edge when you invoke it?
Gutted. It still looks the same. I kind of wanted to see the little glowing edge they put around it because I thought it looked nice. But that does bring me on to one thing, and I don't know if this will work on the video, but if you hold your phone up, I'll just block my kids out. But if you push the button, you can see the screen dings on the side there where you push the button. That's quite nice. And it's the same with the volume buttons. Yeah. So you just get like a little pulse where your button is. It's quite nice that hardware, software coming together. And I guess that's also linked to the new Siri as well. But I think overall it's a nice little update. It feels like it could have been a point update, if I'm honest, but they've got to do a new version every year.
Most of this is going to be the AI stuff that they bring in, isn't it? So there's no point in sticking the betas on really until that, and even that I've read might be invite only. So
yeah, I think there's
we'll see.
And Apple was a bit frustrated on this in the keynote, and they weren't exactly explicit on what's coming when to who, what, and how. I think that's a little disappointing, if I'm honest. But we just go through it. I'm happy to be on the beta train. I've noticed no major issues. And then just briefly, I'll go on to the iPad OS. So iPad OS got everything we've just talked about. Fantastic. The new tab bar, so if you remember in the keynote, they showed the TV app with the bar at the top, and it morphs over onto the side. For me, it's not in tvOS, but it is in Apple News. And I was like, I don't understand what all the fuss is about. Actually, they've done a really nice job. So in the previous version on iPad, you don't have the tab bar at the bottom in News. You just had the sidebar, which was great, but you had to keep turning the sidebar on and off to change where you wanted to navigate to. Whereas now, when the sidebar's not there, you've got a floaty bar at the top. You can customize it a little bit, which is nice. I think they've just done a really good job. I thought it was quite nice. Enjoyed it. Probably not everybody feels the same, but I thought it was good.
I can jump in at this point. I've also installed the beta on my iPad. I've barely used my iPad, so I don't notice many things. I did notice this in News, though, and it felt quite dumbed down to me. The second you start scrolling, it sort of vanishes up to the top, and it felt a bit awkward, apparently, and I haven't tried this. You can drag things into that tab bar if you want to customize it a little bit, so that's better. But it just feels a bit idiotification of iPad OS, and it's already pretty simple, so I'm not sure about this.
I quite liked it. But it does go into jiggle mode when you drag things into it. So there you and I talking jiggle mode might go. It's actually jiggle modes in more places. I actually thought it was okay. I think it's good. And like I say, I like that it's got all the control center, the icon changes, which is nice. The best thing, though, is the maths script, did they call it? I'm trying to remember now. Where you can...
Math notes.
Math notes, thank you. So you can do this in Notes or in the calculator, and you can write with your pencil 8 times 8 equals, and it just does it for you. Really well done. Whoever's designed, come up with all that, implemented it, tested it, fantastic. Really good bit of functionality. Love it.
Yeah, I'm glad you've got an almost £2,500 tablet to do that on mine.
It's more than £2,500 by the time you bought a pencil, a keyboard, and a case.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay.
Don't spoil my fun. Anyway, but on the whole, iPad, there's not a lot of changes, which is a bit sad because I had hoped maybe Stage Manager could support more than 4 apps with my M4, and I expected, I think, it to take advantage of the M4 a little bit more, but that's obviously not a thing that they've gone down. But equally, I'm happy. Nothing's really broken, and I was very happy with how my iPad was before, but you can see iPads are diminishing out in the marketplace.
So here's the thing, and I've linked to Viticci, Federico Viticci, who we know was an outspoken proponent of the iPad for a very long time. And sorry, this comes over a little negative, but I am feeling a little underwhelmed, particularly in light of the hardware that you're using is incredible, and we talked about this at the time. So Federico says, following WWDC, given that math notes are available in iOS 18.2, so far I count exactly 2 exclusive iPadOS 18 features. Redesigned tab bars, Apple Pencil Smart Script. Operating system for a $2,000 computer, 2 exclusive new features. Makes sense. He's not wrong.
It is a bit disappointing. I can't lie to you, there's not lots of new features, but equally, I'm comfortable with it, but we weren't promised any new features either. But you can definitely see why at the iPad event they didn't preview anything coming in iOS 18, because there's nothing coming in iPadOS 18.
And I want to circle back to, you said you watched a bit of the talk show, and Steve Troughton-Smith obviously watched it as well. And was Federici and a couple of the other Apple executives there. I don't know who exactly was there. John Turnus and someone else possibly?
No, it was Joz and Federici, and then they've been joined for the second half by the Apple Intelligence guy. He's called JG.
Right. The iPad comments on the talk show live have me feeling like maybe I might be done with iPad. As someone who has loved the platform and has used it exclusively as my portable computer for 12 years, it doesn't feel good to have a round table of Apple executives laugh with derision at what I want to do on that form factor. That's not a platform whose future I can have confidence in, nor one I want to build new apps for.
Yeah, I can see it. I love my iPad. So outside of work, I use my iPad the most, probably out of all my devices, because I'll grab it, I'll read the newspaper on it, I'll send messages on it, I'll browse the web, put it away. And I'm loving my new iPad. I love the smaller form factor, love the performance of it. But it is frustrating that when you really want to plug it into a second screen and do more with it, it's a little hamstrung.
Yeah, and this sort of extends to my next piece of worry, really, which is Vision OS is basically iPadOS made writ large. And if they're going to disable iPadOS, never enable iPadOS to what it could become, trying to sell you on a £3,500 computer they're going to do exactly the same with, which, all right, has a new funky way of interacting with it. But fundamentally, the apps and everything you're going to be using are going to be hamstrung in exactly the same way that iPadOS is. And I don't think that's great for building a computing platform for the future.
Yeah, I expected more on the iPad this year, I think, because they're using it for Vision OS. I thought, well, those two are going to move more. You have the iPhone, the iPad, and the Vision moving more in lockstep with each other, and they probably get more investment, but it doesn't feel like that's happened, sadly.
Anyway, early in the beta cycle, we don't know. Anything else to say on iPadOS? And we'll quickly do a couple of follow-up features.
Sadly not, but again, the control center changes have been amazing. I just love that I've actually got rid of all of my home widgets now because I've got it all in control center, and I think that's quite nice. I don't need to have some widgets here in different places on different devices. I can have it all in the one place. So that is something I am enjoying.
I'm glad they tidied those things up. So 9to5Mac have got a quite nice little sort of roundup of all the things that are coming later, probably in iOS 18.1, so not even in the release for the beta. So Siri's on-screen awareness and in-app actions won't be there. Apple won't be there till 18.1. Apple Mail upgrades won't be there. Vision Pro enhancements, including the Mac Virtual Display, won't be there. The new emoji won't be there, including exhausted face, which is the best emoji. Non-beta versions of Apple Intelligence won't be there. Drag and drop from phone to Mac. The Home app improvements, including things like robot vacuum cleaners, won't be there. That's quite a good list, actually. I mean, that's quite a lot of the features people are really waiting for, particularly Apple Intelligence.
But it just says non-beta versions of Apple Intelligence, so hopefully we will get it in a beta version. And I think, as we just talked about, like with Microsoft, I think it was, they should put a beta flag on it to begin with because it is so new and so general. I'm glad they're putting a beta flag on it. So if we all got Apple Intelligence in beta mode, I think we'd be comfortable with that.
The next article it's worth a look at is, again, Federico talking about his website, Mac Stories, opting out of the Apple bot and the sort of trials and tribulations they've had around that. He's very much against the fact that Apple are just doing this, and I think he's got a point. And we've already talked about it. I won't go into a bit of detail, but it's quite interesting to get it from that sort of creator's perspective.
Yeah, he's not happy about that, is he?
No, he's not. And lastly, apparently there's 2 new features in iOS 18 that they haven't really talked about at all. I don't know if you've noticed these as part of your beta, but apparently there's more engagement of the senses with music haptics.
No, I do use music a lot. I hadn't noticed this.
I guess if you're deaf, hard of hearing, then that's really useful that you can actually feel the music a little bit as well. I guess I'll let you try it because that won't be coming to the iPad, but maybe in a future beta I'll check it out. But that might be a little bit of homework for you.
Yep, I can take a look at that.
And then SharePlay is coming to everyone, even those without Apple Music, which I don't understand how that works really, but you're going to be able to do that.
I guess you just go to, if you had an Android device, you scan the QR code, go to the website, I guess, and you can change the playlist. I must confess,
you can chuck a song in, yeah.
But the functionality in the car, you can show the QR code on your dash in the car, and I thought, great, my son can control the music, I love it. I've never got that to work. And even when I thought, I'm on a beta and he's on a different version, but we all got round to the same version on iOS 17 and it still never worked, which is frustrating because I thought it was a great bit of functionality.
That was a tentpole. I've never thought to try it. I've seen the QR code as well on the one car of mine that's got CarPlay, but never thought to try it.
I thought it was great. Like I said, children in the back, often I ask them what they want to play, but I'd rather they control the music while I'm driving and I'm not trying to find tunes.
Well, I've got a scenario. Say you've got a teenage daughter who's driving and they've got a very dedicated playlist of artists you've never heard of in your life that you think, I'd like to chuck one of mine in here, and it shows on the screen. So maybe next time I'll actually pull my phone out and try it.
I think I'd like to hear whether it works or not. I'm annoyed I haven't got it to work.
Fair enough. Is there anything else in the main show we haven't covered?
No, I think we're largely there. I mean, obviously there is a lot of noise as we've discussed around how Apple have done some of the AI features and not owned it, but on the whole, I think it's really good.
App of the week then. My app of the week is called Rectangle. So it's a window snapping tool. This is one of the standout features of macOS 18 that's been becoming at the platform, where finally Apple have done the same as every other operating system vendor, where if you drag a window to the edge of the screen, it should snap into half the screen, the whole screen, or a quarter of the screen, something like that. It doesn't yet. I don't think it does in the beta yet. It's coming later. Frankly, you don't have the macOS beta on that Mac, so you can't test it right now.
I can't test now, but Rectangle is there, the dragging and the snapping.
Okay.
Did you hear a story that apparently this was patented as part of Windows Vista and the patent's expired and that's why Apple's now done it? There's mixed belief in whether this is true or not, but it's quite an interesting story.
That's absolute nonsense. Every Linux has had this, as going back as far as I can think.
I concur with you on this one, but it was just an interesting story I heard.
Anyway, before you get onto the iOS 18 final version or beta, you can use an app called Rectangle. I hope they haven't Sherlocked it too badly. It allows you to do this with a lot of fine-grained stuff. You can control snapping of windows with a keyboard. You can drag it to the edge of the screen. You can drag them up next to each other. It just works really well. It's open source and it's free. It's a great app, Rectangle.
Yep. I have used it before. I think it's very good. So on to Thing of the Week, just very briefly. I went and watched Inside Out 2 yesterday, 2D IMAX cinema, so massive screen, great sound with one of my children and my wife. Loved it. What a cool film. I just love Inside Out. I love the concept of it. I didn't know how my youngest son would appreciate it because obviously they go into somebody's head and the thoughts. He doesn't like, he gets a bit unsure about films like that, like with Soul. He just didn't like the concept of it. But it was Pixar brilliant. They've done such a good job of onboarding people that may not have seen Inside Out 1, which is a travesty if you haven't. But for me, it was great. I've got a son who's about to be a teenager. It's all about the main character Riley becoming a teenager and the other emotions they get, and I think it just landed at the right time for us because it's very relatable to my eldest son, who sadly couldn't join us because he's away, but fantastic, really good Pixar film. And actually I must say there's been a lot of negativity around Pixar, but I've actually really enjoyed the Luca film, Inside Out 2, and I'm missing one.
Lightyear.
I did enjoy Lightyear. I actually really like Lightyear, but it got panned. But I actually for me, I loved it. And my children loved Turning Red. So for me, I think they've actually had some fantastic films. And Elemental as well. So in our household, Pixar still is relatively strong. Good Dinosaur was a travesty and should never have been made, let alone released. But I think the rest of them, they've done really good. And I did actually go back and rewatch Luca this week. Fantastic. Such a good film. So I would recommend Inside Out. It comes out in about 100 days to Disney Plus. So I think they're quite good at telling you it's 100 days, so it's about a third of a year, which probably feels like the right time to give it a cinema exclusivity window and then a streaming window. So I'm quite comfortable with that.
Onward wasn't very good either.
My kids actually quite like that.
It wasn't very good.
It was okay. It wasn't Pixar at its finest.
Yeah.
Do you know what though? It does feel like quite a few Pixar films are the ones like with Soul and Inside Out, where you've got this, the thoughts of going on in, and the way they relate it to real life. It's quite cool. That seems to be a thing they've tapped into.
It's a good review. I like Inside Out very much. I think it was definitely one of their stronger films in the last few years. And the character Ding Dong was a real,
Ding
I
Dong.
hope Ding Dong doesn't come back. They haven't brought Ding Dong back
I
in
know
some
it's
way because
Bing Bong.
Bing Bong, Bing Bong. I hope not, because that was a truly moving character arc.
Yep. It's a similar concept. Look, they end up obviously doing something similar, but so good. And they have sarcasm, so a massive chasm opens up in the mind, and they go, "Oh, that's sarcasm," and I thought, oh, that's genius. So that made me smile. But no, it's very well done. And like I say, if anybody's got a teenage child or has been through teenage children, such as yourself, it is so worth watching. So would recommend.
Sounds good. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
Yeah, 100%. So thanks for everybody for listening. If you want to get in contact, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch us on YouTube by going to awakefromsleep.com and clicking on the YouTube link. Or you can drop us an email at awakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.